From our writing prompt. He was resting on a wooden bed, with a layer of hay as his only comfort. A single, horsehair blanket separated him from the fodder. He was wearing a long dress shirt turned grey from the decades of use. There were so many patches in it he would often joke that he owned over a dozen shirts, not just one. The only things living within earshot were the animals he kept on his farm, but he continued to make the joke nonetheless. A half smirk always crept up on him afterwards. The only thing keeping him warm was the heavy blanket of wolf pelts he's added to over the years. Out in the woods, away from the clatter of civilization, predators were more common and much more bold. He fought them off with a spear, now mostly rusted and leaning in the corner with cobwebs covering it. When someone eventually stumbles upon this lost cabin, they could discover a mighty weapon, if they looked closely enough. The cabin itself was built with a set of tools for which he traded the last of his gems. When he left, then a young man, restless and foolhardy, he kept his crown. He broke it to pieces, over time, to use when he needed supplies. Now his only riches were the things he made with his own 2 hands. He had to learn how to chop down trees, how to bind the wood together, and even how to stack the logs so that they don't collapse within minutes. The door and window frames gave him particular trouble. But he managed to accomplish everything he set his mind to, so long as he refused to give up. He couldn't stand any more. He planned ahead at least that far when he realized what was happening to him, when he realized his hacking was getting worse and he was too old to make the trek to the closest medicine man. He laid the stores of his food around the bed, within arm's reach, so he wouldn't starve to death. He was forced to live hungry over the years, when his stock didn't produce enough to live on. He didn't want to experience that ever again, even at the end. Whatever sickness was taking hold of him could have him, but he'll be damned if he was going to face death with an empty stomach. With the time he had left, he studied the walls of his home. The walls were thick enough to keep out the cold during the winter, that was something he was proud of. He remembered what it was like, hauling the timber to the spot he had picked out, how his sweat almost made him lose his grip several times on the way. Gods, he thought, he was young and strong then. He glanced over to the fire pit he dug in the middle of the cabin. He thought of all the animals he had trapped and eaten. Each one of them cooked over a fire he made, alone. Without the help of servants or maids or useless aristocrats who had never deigned to tie their own trousers up. His memories flooded back to him when he saw the weapon, the one thing he still owned from his previous life. He thought of the enemies he faced in those woods, not just wolves, but bears and thieves who had considered him easy prey. He proved them all wrong, every time. That familiar smirk came back again for a last time when he recalled the sight of people running away, defeated and shamed. This, he thought, was also something he was proud of. His eyes slowly made their way to the foot of his bed. An old and almost forgotten image lit up, crawling back from the depths of his mind. The memory of a young and beautiful woman who sat at the end of his dusty, hay-filled sack he slept on. Before he left his former life, he would have thought she was common and unworthy of his attention. That fact pained him and brought tears down his wrinkled face. She was lost and looking desperate for help when she knocked on his door. She led him to the bed and told him she would do anything for enough food to last her through the week. He caressed her face, hugged her, and gave her all the food he could spare without asking for anything in return. He wondered if he would have helped anyone in the same way if he had stayed in his kingdom. He closed his eyes for a final time and hoped he would dream. End of story.